kind of policy change, perhaps that, some of the tech folks were adjusting or something, but now it seems to be working just fine. So unless they, 2 days later adjusted that setting, it was maybe just a temporary bug that was happening there.
That happened to me during a meeting once. So I just couldn't get the live stream to work. It wouldn't clear through.
Very strange. Well, it was fine. I was able to record and then just upload it afterwards. So that worked. Bear with me one moment and I will share my screen. Okay. All right. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Boards of Education Policy Committee at, my participant window is hiding the time, 9:03 a.m. on August 20th, 2021. Members in attendance, Maureen Williams, Chris Parkin, John Stinson, Dr. Stephanie Pearson-Ugal, and we have one member of the public in attendance as well. We'll go to, I don't believe we have any minutes to approve, as we did not meet last week due to a lack of quorum.
Do we have the minutes from the prior week to approve?
I thought the prior week we also lacked quorum.
I think there's got to be minutes to approve from somewhere.
I think it's been 2. So we will go back and check in on the sort of status of minutes from the last meeting where we did actually have them, and make sure that those are properly approved for our next meeting. That'll take us to public comment.
Perhaps for the purposes of the minutes, the attendees could just identify themselves by their first and last name if they're a member of the public.
Yes.
Although it's not required.
Right. And I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand to make comment. So we will move on to committee member comment. Hearing none, we'll move on to discussion and possible action. So we have our sort of 3 major pillars here: the CADE model policy review, the administrative updates, and tri-board governance topics. I think we have bottomed out on the tri-board governance, so I don't think we need to save time for that today. I think we do probably have some administrative updates, and perhaps the lion's share of our time today will want to spend in that bucket, and I think related to this document.
Yes,
which is about hazing, bullying, and sort of other related policies, and the sort of comparison of the 3. I'll put it to my fellow committee members whether or not we want to make an adjustment to the agenda to specifically call this out.
I think we should start there. I mean, I think we can't adjust. This is a regular meeting, right?
It is.
So why don't I just move that we add as agenda item, what would be 3A, 4A, whatever the next thing is, review of school climate policies.
So 5, we're moving that 5A perhaps?
5A, the review of school climate policies.
Okay.
Policy related to school climate.
Do I hear a second? Thank you, Maureen. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Maureen, I'm going to do roll call vote. Maureen Williams?
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Chris Parkin?
Yes, and I see Gwen coming in for the record.
I see Gwen as well. I think Gwen came in just after the motion started, so I'll vote yes, and will be three yes votes. And I don't think that counts as an abstention because she wasn't in yet. So it passes unanimously, and so that means we now have agenda item 5A as the review of our hazing and bullying. So Dr. Pearson-Ugal, I wasn't sure if you wanted to sort of give us a tour of these. I am obviously going to zoom in here because even I can't read that on my screen.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Good.
So as you know, new legislation went into effect last month that includes a change to the definition of bullying, and then a number of other aspects in the bullying and harassment policies. So I am hopeful that this committee can take a look at the 3 relevant policies across the 3 districts and create a common policy that is updated. I have directed each building's administrative team to update their definition of bullying in their handbooks to reflect current legislation, even though we have not yet adopted a changed policy, because we need this to be in place for the start of the school year. So what I've done, so Easton and Reading essentially have the same policy. The Region 9 policy is called aggression and violent behavior. So there are a number of things in the Region 9 policy, which is an older policy, that differ, and that information is highlighted. In the Easton and Reading policies, I've highlighted the updated language that comes from the new legislation. And then I used a different color for the portion that you might want to discuss as a group and consider changes to the language. But I've tried to just integrate the new language so that this process can be efficient.
Great.
So I would really look
very
at the
helpful.
Easton side, which is where I put the changes.
Okay. So should we sort of zoom to the highlighted pieces to see the additions first, or do people want to go through just sort of as one cohesive process?
A sort of preliminary question, and I regret that I haven't drilled into this myself yet. The policies that have been approved date to when? Like, when was the last time the boards looked at them? And has there been an interim recommendation from CAVE that might suggest we look at any other sections of this? I
don't have the current policies right in front of me, although I'm sure I can find them. I'm sure we have them in our folder. And I'm not aware of any CAVE policies.
Chris, if it helps, I have looked for CAVE updates and haven't found them. Doesn't mean they don't exist. It may be just a function of either poor searching on my part or poor search capabilities on their site. And I've looked through my emails as well to see if any of those policy updates touched on this. And I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I have the paper copies in front of me, so I can give you the dates of our current policies. So the Region 9 aggression and violent behavior is the last it was revised is 2011. And the
Easton's is 1999.
Oh, I have 2017, policy approved 2017.
The website has one from 1999.
Okay.
So our
The
print
paper
version is
copy I
more
have in
up to
front of
date
me
than
is-
the website.
What twilight zone am I living in?
Yes, it's
Wacky.
another entirely separate conversation, but I've asked our new director of technology and digital learning to do a review also to be sure we have more consistent posting, both in terms of paper to website, but also there are a few places where an Easton policy has the wrong footer, says Reading, and vice versa.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And in
this is
some
a-
cases where there are graphics as opposed to a searchable document in the policies.
It was
And so
uploaded as
that
an
does need
image
to be
instead of as
updated.
text.
So it made it
Um,
more challenging, honestly, because in our work to try and search the documents for common terms,
Right.
we couldn't do that because in some cases they're posted as graphics.
This is not a conversation for today, but I've heard repeatedly recently frustrations people have had with finding agendas and minutes and things,
Right.
and notice of meetings. And I share that because if I weren't very much in the weeds, I would not know where to look necessarily to make sure I'm aware of meetings when they're posted. It used to be much easier when we had a simple sort of static website where you just hit refresh and they would populate. But I would be in favor of, and Sarah might be able to help with this, a platform like Boardbook has an electronic platform for schools where you could have agendas and minutes and hyperlink to documents that are related to those agendas and minutes, and also maintain your policy book electronically like that that's all searchable and clickable all in one platform.
Yes.
I think that we're to the point where it's sort of silly not to look at that as a worthwhile investment from a transparency perspective and a compliance perspective.
Yes, so Sarah is absolutely working on. I've provided her a number of questions that will allow her to do some baseline research into our current status with respect to communication and the websites. And then also very specific to this conversation, I'm looking to create an entirely different space for school climate information that also includes sort of a visual graphic so that the information might be posted in more than one place, but it would give parents, community members, students one place to go to that would include the Safe School Climate Plan, the relevant board policies, the forms, the reporting forms, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to make that more front and center so that parents don't have to dig so much to find information.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Again, do we want to go through? I'll just give everybody 17 pages, right? Although it's 17 pages of single column essentially. Do we want to stop at the highlighted items and specifically focus on those for now, and then go through the entire sort of set of documents, or what's the preferred process?
There's the top line question of keeping our principles as a committee in mind, the keep it simple approach.
Yep.
Making sure that we're focusing on what needs to be in the policy as opposed to what might be nice to have in the policy.
Right. So does that mean that calls for let's go through the whole thing and review under, or is it let's go through and understand the statutory requirements?
Wow, you're really talking like a lawyer this morning, Mr. Stinson. I just called you Mr. Parkin. Mr. Parkin also talks like I think that it seems like the new legislation added a lot more requirements for what our policy must state.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we already had a comprehensive one besides that.
Right.
So this might be an instance where our policy cannot be super simple because we are now required to have more than we used to be required. On the other hand, we had a lot more than we were required to have.
Right. And it feels to me with this policy in particular, it might be useful to have building leaders weigh in as well about the utility of sort of this policy as it sort of as it relates to their ability to sort of enforce sort of what's healthy for the overall school population.
Who is the person who's actually though enforcing the policy? If there's it's the dean, right? It's in the high school.
We don't have a dean any longer.
Yeah,
sorry. You know what I meant.
It's so the Safe School Climate Specialist in each building is the assistant principal at the high school, the assistant principals, plural. The administration in general would have the greatest use for this policy because anytime there's an official action taken with a student, the policy is referenced.
Right.
So is it their input that you're looking for, or is
well,
it?
They've provided their input to me. I've had two pretty lengthy meetings of the School Climate Committee, and I think that they're just feeling an urgency to get the definition and the new anything that's procedural updated.
Yep.
I trust this committee to determine what really needs to be in policy versus what can be more regulation or implementation operations.
So that's actually really helpful context and I think injects a bit of urgency into my own thinking about how we go through this process. Let me float this and see how everyone thinks of it. I would say we focus on the highlighted parts that are being added. That unless we have a real issue with them, that we try to move this quickly to our respective boards for first and second reading and get it so that our stated approved policy is in compliance with the new laws. And then flag this for a deeper review, which I think has to go on 2 tracks that we don't normally sort of drive down in a really deep way. First track is, let's make sure that we know specifically every sort of citation of sort of the statutory requirements, that we can sort of articulate that really clearly, and that we can identify the parts that are in there because we think we also need these policies. And then just make sure that our sort of building leaders and Dr. Pearson, you all say, yes, we're crystal clear about, here are the things we have to have. We may agree with them, but we also have to have them. And then here are the things that we've added to it because we think it creates the sort of the best climate for all students to learn. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
I think so. For what it's worth, John, I just emailed you the CABE model policy.
Okay.
Pulled off of their policy service.
Okay.
And it looks like it's been updated with respect to the new statute. So it might be helpful just to make sure we're picking up things that it is suggesting. Although it looks substantially similar to what we have here, which is good.
Yeah, I suspect if we have anything that says 2017, I suspect it came out of CABE. It's got the same number.
CABE has language about beginning in 2021 and each year thereafter. So that suggests that it's relatively recent.
Okay, so it likely includes the highlighted.
Right. It talks about Safe School Climate Committee and its obligations after 7/1/21.
Okay.
Yes, so that is the most current, I'm sure.
So the danger here is if we have made customizations to our own based on the recommendation of building leaders or based on, sort of past practices to ensure.
Right. I think I would suggest probably adding the K policy as a column here, just as a gut check as we go through the work that our folks have already done.
Yeah.
And just make sure that it is, where there is a conflict, we make sure that it is an acceptable conflict and not.
Yeah, I would also say that I'm inclined to carve this up a little bit more for that deeper process that I was describing that I think we would want to go through. I would try to sort of similar to the way that we've done some other processes recently, where we sort of identify the common clause and then put the sort of competing language in sort of adjacent rows. In this format, it may be difficult for us to sort of make sure that we're sort of talking about the same thing as we're reading from left to right.
You're thinking of a spreadsheet that says, here's how we can define school employee. Do you want A, B, or C, basically?
So exactly. And right now, like we have definitions. Oh, cool. So definitions, here's what it means, A, B, C, D, E. I can see that happens to be here as well. Here, there's no tag that says definitions, but I can see right here for the purposes of this is the equivalent of definitions. So just sort of tagging each one of those things, say like, what is this? And to your point, Chris, this is what a school employee is. This is what a student is. If any of those things are highlighted in here, sort of carving it up in that way, I think allows us to start to compare these in a really meaningful way. And then adding in the CABE model policy, I think is helpful as well. Right, this would be our introductory text definition. So I think this is all definition, and then somewhere down here we're going to get to more of the policy stuff. Okay, so why don't we? I mean, it sounds like we want to do a little bit of sort of additional work to carve this up and understand it.
Maybe can we ask Stephanie sort of what her process was and what the administration's process was to get to these edits, so that we're not just duplicating that effort if they've already done this?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the process of discussing sort of the bigger picture of the implementation of the policy with the assistant principals just included their investigation process. and the changes in the new language. The new language include more of a harassment standard, the hostile environment. And it also broadens, it broadens those who might be involved with a bullying, a potential bullying or harassment situation, that it's not just within the school. It could be, it already included cyberbullying, but could it actually include people who are not in the school? So the conversation that I had with them was really about having language that's very clear, because in their work with students and with parents, they need to be able to explain when something rises to the level of an investigation and when it does not. So it's really about the clarity of the language to assist them in their work. The actual policy was really this document that you have in front of you is the result of work that I did with our director of technology to just get the three lined up next to each other. So I think the assistant principals who serve as safe climate specialists really just want, I know that policy is often not in plain language, but they want something that can be referenced that helps parents navigate the process.
Yeah, agreed. I actually think there's a really important requirement for that. And it's good to hear that we're all sort of on the same page about that. So I would propose that we take a look in sort of column A, and Dr. Pearson-Ugal, is this section here with the highlighted, or I don't know if it's highlighted, but it's just sort of different font color.
Yes.
Is that included in the, I thought I saw, so here we have actual highlighting, the different font color. Is there a meaning to that?
Yes, there is. So I'm looking at the legislation at the same time. So the school climate definition from the new legislation is that's additional language.
Okay. And
based on patterns. So looking at House Bill number 7215, I can see that where it used to end with students and adults, it now includes based on patterns of, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the blue language is new in the legislative language.
Okay. And the highlighted language, the green highlights?
So further down, in the green, this is my note says will require review and edit. So this is where I thought that there might be some choices regarding what you want to include.
Oh, I see. So this is like a comment. This is not a part of the policy.
I'm just finding where it is.
That's statutory language. It says pursuant to section 4 of this act. So I think it's just pulled from the statute.
I think though, just this right here, this will require review and edit is a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my comment.
Below is
and then this is the
pulled from the statute.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So this
my
is
comment,
actually
that's my comment to you all.
I got it. And but this was existing language that now requires review, or this is new language added because this is actually the same as the blue font stuff, right? It's the same as this.
The blue font looks like it's pulled in policy language, even if it's straight out of the statute. The green font looks like it's statute language. It cross-references another section of the statute.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So all additions. And so I just want to see if there's anything else here. And it doesn't look like it. Okay, good. So there's actually not that much that was added.
No, it is a significant change, but in terms of the number of words, it's not a lot.
So it looks like our first change is in the definitions, extending what we previously had under definition E, substantially disrupts the educational process or the orderly operation of a school. We now have an F.
Can I just clarify? I don't
Sure.
want people to be confused by the yellow highlight for Region 9. The Region
Right.
9 policy is just so much older. I
Right.
was attempting to highlight the relevant language, but I really think you should, focus on the left column.
Yeah, I think that's what I was taking away from your description before as well. Okay, so focused here in this first column, we have new under definitions F, an act that is direct or indirect and severe, persistent, or pervasive, which A, causes physical or emotional harm to an individual, B, places an individual in reasonable fear or physical or emotional harm, or C, infringes on the rights or opportunities of an individual at school. So it's interesting because there's some overlap there between A and F.
What's also sort of interesting to me, and I'm looking at the way that the CABE policy handles this, and it only has 3 sub-bullets for its definition of bullying. It excludes the hostile environment piece, but then has a subsection that says that when bullying creates a hostile environment, there's a different result. And so it sort of creates a split in how you handle those hostile environment situations. This policy, if we make hostile environment part of bullying, would apply across the board as part of the definition of bullying, as opposed to a subset for which there are different conditions precedent.
Interesting.
And so I could conceive of that generating different outcomes. I just want to make sure that it's possible that CABE screwed up and the statute is more restrictive, and we need to make sure that hostile environment is part of the bullying definition. But I just wanted to flag that as a distinction at this point.
Yeah, or it may be that that having those sort of dual tracks has a lot of utility, right? So that may be a question for building leaders, in discussion with Dr. Pearson Ugall to sort of explore the CABE policy versus what we have here.
Because the CABE policy about hostile environment talks about if you engage on, let's see. If you engage on school grounds at a school event, at a bus stop, or through electronic devices, or outside of school, if it creates a hostile environment for the system. So then it says that that's an example. An example of bullying includes engaging in conduct that would create a hostile environment for the victim.
So it's sort of,
so they've managed to use examples to further distill the definition in a way that is just more confusing.
right. Okay, but worth reviewing as well. So let's continue. It looks like the word need was added. Bullying shall include, but need not be. Maybe that was just
It almost looks like it was correcting a typo from the from the previous version.
Yeah.
Need not.
Yeah, that's probably right. Hold on. Photo electronic. Okay. Just shake it off. All right. Under the school climate means paragraph, it looks like we have an addition here. So school climate means the quality and character of school life with a particular focus on the quality of the relationships within the school community between and among students and adults based on patterns of students, parents, and guardians and school employees' experiences of school life, including but not limited to norms, goals, values, interpersonal relationships, teaching and learning practices, and organizational structures, and reflects norms, values, interpersonal. Okay, so so there's a little bit of redundant language there as well that maybe needs to be reconciled.
Yeah, defining positive school climate and school climate. So this will then inform a change to our safe school climate plan.
Okay.
And that seems like it was pulled right out of the statute.
Right.
And it's almost word for word identical to the CABE definition, which I'm guessing came out of the statute.
Yes, I'm looking at the statute right now.
Mhm. I'm just reading through. Okay. So I think there's only one other section. Let's hit that and then let's come up with a plan. All right. And then so then this is the language that was also right out of the,
Legislation.
yeah, okay. Okay, that's not particularly helpful.
Right, because so it's making reference to the legislation. So I really questioned whether that would be useful in the policy, because if the legislation is not there sort of as a companion document, then
Right,
it sends people digging somewhere else.
right. Okay.
Trying to align here. The CABE section on this is requires each school to notify parents or guardians of all students involved in a verified act of bullying not later than 48 hours after completion of the investigation of the results of such investigation, and verbally and by electronic mail, that such parents or guardians may refer to the plan language explanation of rights and remedies on the district's website, which I think sort of summarizes the obligation of the statute without putting people into a wild goose chase. I'm looking on bullet 8 there. Yeah. I would even take out that parenthetical, like, available under the statute, who cares? We put statutory references in the footer.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
I think that achieves the goal reasonably. The purpose is to require that the plan require notice.
So I think we need to do a little bit of wordsmithing. And I think that tends to be done best not in these sessions. But if we can each take a look and think about what we'd want, and then we can come back to this next Friday and add these items. And I think my goal would be that we get to a point where we can approve language that we would recommend to our boards. I think there's a bigger question about a sort of a more meaningful sort of consolidation of all of these policies that I think takes a little bit longer. And I think, and sort of requires a little bit more of this is what creature is this, and sort of really understanding this sort of in a sort of deeper taxonomical way.
So to be clear, we'd be recommending basically language would be fine in the left-hand column, which is where we're sort of working. And
Right.
we would recommend that be adopted in the held for first reading in the September board cycle
Right.
for all three boards.
Right.
And it would wholesale replace 513121A in Region
No.
9? Because it's going to create a conflict. if it doesn't.
And that's what I don't think that we can do if we want to move quickly with this, because I think this language is going to require probably quite a bit of conversation amongst the Region 9 board, and maybe Maureen and Gwen can tell me if I'm wrong, if the Region 9 board is predisposed to sort of replace this wholesale with whatever we come up in the left, then fine. But I suspect that that's going to be a fairly controversial conversation. And if we want to do something quickly to comply with the sort of new statutes, then I think that the right answer is for us to recommend language specific to that. I think that the Reading language and the Easton language are close enough that I think that'll be a less controversial conversation.
Right. I agree in as much as Easton and Reading should be able to revise their existing 5131 911 without a problem.
Right.
What I'm concerned about is if we suggest that Region 9 adopt 5131 911 without supplanting 5131 21, you're going to have a conflict in what these things mean. And that's possibly worse than having no 5131 911.
Yeah, and I wasn't actually recommending that. I was recommending sort of making the relevant changes to 5131 21 that will bring it into compliance, and suggest a more sort of wholesale approach where we can align these things as a sort of just a somewhat longer process, because I don't think especially if we want to hit the September board cycle for this, I don't think that we have that.
I mean, I guess, do we want to give Maureen and Gwen kind of an option A, option B? Here's option A, 5131 911, which we all are going to adopt. And here's option B, which is how you make 5131 21 conform with the current landscape.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm curious as to why you think that this would be a greater problem at Region 9 as opposed to the other boards, because if the model here is to get uniform policies across all districts, I don't think anyone objects to that. I missed part of your conversation because something spilled on my keyboard.
Oh no.
So I'm looking at you on two screens I'm looking at the document on one screen and you on another. But I'm curious as to why you think that, because that's not been my experience that per se it's more difficult, or just it's more difficult. Now, if there's something that you're thinking that's unique to the situation at the high school that I am not thinking of at this point, that would make this more problematic, then I'd be curious as to what that is. And certainly everyone wants to, or at least in principle, streamline this and get one policy across all of them without me sitting here, going line by line between the two versions and saying what might be applicable to the high school. I can't say definitively it shouldn't be a problem, but I can't say that principally it should be. That makes sense.
So there's a couple of...
let me jump in. I remember when we put in the 5131.21 and at the time the assistant principals, I had them choose between the two, and they chose that one. They thought it was better aligned with all of the the follow-on documents that they had created. But at the same time, if the general principle is to line up as best we can, I don't think K-12 systems have the students hazing bullying operating K-8 and then a different one 9-12. But there would be some work that the assistant principals would have to do, because in some of the letters they have pre-written, and some of the steps that they've got mapped out that specifically references this stuff. So they would need to have some amount of time to go through and change those things.
Yep.
Yeah. So Tom, what I was saying is that this first step will then inform changes to the Safe School Climate Plan, which then in turn will inform changes to letters, procedural steps, et cetera,
Right.
and what's communicated to students and to parents.
But we've always ultimately benefited by standardizing the expectations before the kids get to the high school, website layout, things like that.
Agreed. So, Maureen, in answer to your question, I think 3 reasons. One is the reason that Tom just gave, and that is that I think there's sort of connectivity between the actual practices, regulations that are attached to these policies, and there may be more work that needs to be done. 2, the policies between the 3, the Easton and Reading are very similar. The Region 9 is very different. And so we're just talking about a sort of a bigger delta between the two. And so because of that change, it sort of a careful and sort of considered approach to that change and sort of the impact onto the actual practices, I think needs to be more deliberate. And three, on the topic of being more deliberate, we're engaged right now not in the larger project. We've said that we have sort of two tracks that we're on. The larger project is we're sort of plowing through the model policy and doing our best to, sort of create a sort of a single new policy. This is actually the second track, which is when urgent matters come up, when new, so regulation,
Right, I got
and
it.
so while our goal is absolutely to try to create a single policy on this topic, I think I'm a little bit concerned about the sort of
The time
timeliness of our response.
Right. And this could be an instance where the greater level of specificity or appearing greater level of specificity in the Region 9 policy could not necessarily be a negative for the lower,
Right.
the lower grades.
I think that's right. I think it may be that we don't want to just say it's all column A. There may be a lot of utility in pulling from column C here.
So all three include a reference in terms of the legislation to teen dating violence. I was trying to think of anything that might be specific to the high school.
Okay.
But there are a number of changes in the legislation. So if the high school policy was last revised in 2011, there are many components of the latest legislation that were adopted in 2012, 2014, and 2019. So a number of changes have been made since that last change for Region 9.
So my proposal is that we specifically all focus our attention on sort of this language, the sort of green language in column A, or teal, let's say, the teal language in column A, and there's not that much. There's what we had above, there's this section, and then there's the highlighted language here, that we compare. I think this language from the CABE model policy is probably better than the green language, sort of the highlighted green language here. And sort of consider, I mean, that's basically it. Like those changes, looking at those for Easton Reading. And if we say, hey, this looks really good for Easton Reading and Region 9, you're welcome to try that on if you want to try that on. But if not, because of the complexity with your existing policy and the conversion of that, how would we take that sort of, it's just, 3 or 4 sections, sort of small sections. How do we take that and sort of mesh it into the Region 9 column?
I would be in favor of straight recommending the conformed policy on the left to all 3 districts and trust Maureen's power of persuasion to convince the Region 9 board that the appropriate response is just to adopt the policy and move on with your life.
Yeah. You might be overstating my powers of persuasion, but we'll go with that.
Okay. All right. Good. So in order for that to happen, I think we have access to this. This is the, I think the document that Chris emailed. I'm going to share it now so people can take a look at the language. Okay.
Procedural question, by the way, who's collecting the minutes now that Sharon is gone?
Who do we send those to?
Lana Whalen.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lana is the one still there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So considering this for the highlighted green text in the document we already have access to and really focusing on column A. Good. And so for next week, our goal will be for each of us to have some ideas about how we would wordsmith and sort of any changes we might want to make. It may be worth, I'm going to highlight this because I think Chris's point about what CABE does there, not that, they sort of stick the landing. It sounds like they don't stick the landing, but it is worth noting that they only have a few sections. So.
Folks, in terms of quorum, I will not be here next week. I have a pretrial that's scheduled at 9. So
I was just going to comment that I have a possible conflict next Friday also professionally.
Okay.
And I believe that when we set our calendar, we did not have a meeting scheduled for the Friday before Labor Day, which is September 3rd.
That's right.
And the Reading board cycle would suggest that this would come up on September 7th. So if we're going to address this sometime in the next 2 weeks, we'll need to schedule separately or agree to meet on the 3rd as a special meeting. We just need to make sure we post the agenda because it's not in our regular cases.
Okay.
Chris, can you also send the CABE model policy?
yes, please.
I just shared
That's
it
what
with
John
everybody.
just shared.
I just
Oh,
shared
you
it
did.
with everybody on
Already
this.
put it into Google. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. And you know what I could do? I could, I'm not going to put it into a column right now, but I'm going to paste it at the bottom here. It's working. Yes. All right. So now it's all in this one document. The old one's there as well still, if anyone wants to go back. Okay. All right, good. Anything else? So I think you're right, Chris. We're probably going to have to do, especially if we want to try to get this in the September cycle.
And I think it's important to get it in the December cycle because that will put it into the adoption cycle in October, and we're already
Right.
sort of behind the 8 ball. So
That's right. Okay. All right. Very good. Anyone have anything else? Okay. I think that will probably be it for discussion and possible actions. We'll go.
Can I,
Yes,
I'm
please.
sorry, nothing
Of
else
course.
on the school climate policy, but then did you already advance a draft of the changes to the lunch policy, the lunch shaming?
No.
I believe so.
We did not.
We substantially did what the legislation does, but we didn't compare the legislation to what we did, even though we ourselves had substantially said the same thing. We were ahead of the legislation,
Yeah,
but
we
no,
got there
nothing
first.
was advanced.
Right. But so a cross check of whether or not the action that we've previously taken satisfies that is
So,
in order.
I mean, so for this year, lunches are being provided for free at no cost for students. So at the high school, they'll be able to have breakfast and lunch at no cost. And at the K-8 schools, they'll be able to have lunch at no cost. So I'm not sure how urgent that is for this
Right.
year, but it's new legislation.
Yep. Okay. Good. Anyone have anything else before we move to public comment?
Are we keeping sort of a project list of our own for the committee? And because we have sort of a few loose ends, I think we should sort of be tracking somewhere.
Yes, it's in the, I think the document, and I don't have it teed up right now, but it's for consideration, or you know what, let me see if I have it. Open issues.
There we go.
Yep. And there were a number of items that we had highlighted as looking for guidance from, the superintendent, or guidance from, sort of one group or another, and did not, I don't think we never bottomed out on those.
Last edit last July.
Right.
This is the song that never ends. Yeah, just wanted to make sure it was recorded somewhere so we're not losing sight of.
Right. Stephanie, do you know where that policy is?
I'll certainly locate it
Okay.
and send it to you.
Okay. Good. Because that it'd be really nice if the answer is we're already in compliance and no need to change anything. But we'll tackle it the next time we meet, along with the wordsmithing work to try to get to a single policy here. Okay, good. We actually don't have any members of the public in attendance, so I'll go to committee member comment. Hearing none. Look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Maureen. Do we have a second? Absent objection, we are adjourned at 9:52 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you,
John.
everyone. Thanks.
Tom and John, can you stand for a second? We lost Tom. All right.